We'll go ahead and get the workshop started for the April 23rd Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And we are going to be talking a lot about budget and trying to get caught up to speed on just all the changes and nuances of what we've been going through the last few weeks and preparing for not just the end of this fiscal year in FY20, but also FY 2021. So before we get started, Alderman Pinchak had reached out to me and just wanted to say a couple things. So I'm going to let him get things kicked off.
Thanks, David. I'll make this brief, but at the last board meeting workshop, after David's presentation, Alderman Pavlin made some comments about delaying work on Mcphee Park. I tried to participate in the discussion, but my mic was not working, and I found that very frustrating, to say the least. So what I would like to suggest is a protocol where if someone is having technical difficulties, we ask for a brief recess until the problem's fixed. It's pretty difficult to be present, but unable to communicate. So I hope we can work through that going forward. I'll be brief on this as well. I must have my say in this matter about the Mcphee Park budget of $8 million, which is in the fiscal year 20 CIP budget. We have been saving up for almost 10 years. Funds are kept separate from the general fund for a purpose. I mean, this project, Mcphee Park Phase 3, has been approved by BOMA, is under contract, and construction is underway. Our citizens have seen the start of this project during this corona crisis, and they are excited and are looking forward to this very positive and welcome addition to our town. I, for one, have tried to accomplish possible time and time again over this project. Limiting the courts from 8 to 4 was difficult for me, and then having to cut out alternate 3, the basketball courts, restrooms, and shelters was another big blow. I still hold out hope that after alternate 2 is completed, that we still have some money left from the $8 million to build a basketball court and some of the elements of the alternate 3. For the end of the base work, and as we start on alternate 2, I recommend that we review our expenditures to see how much money we have left in the budget for complete alternate 3 while the contractor is still on site. I want to make that I am not in favor of cutting back on alternate 2 and expect to proceed. Contact as soon as possible to advise them what the board has approved, and that is Phase 3, which was the base with alternates 1 and 2, so that there is no confusion or delays down the road. I would ask staff to please notify the board members when this has been completed. Thank you for the time. I just wanted to get my words in since I didn't get a chance to talk last workshop. Thank you.
David, I have one thing to say as well. If everybody can hear me.
Yes, sir. We got you.
Tonight, we're going to try our best to get through this. If we cannot, if it ends up that we cannot get through it, then we will try to schedule another meeting for possibly Tuesday night. If we can't get through it then Wednesday night. If we can't get through it then Thursday night. So let's see if we can't get through this tonight. It sure helped things. Thanks.
Okay, unless anybody wants to jump in with any other comments on that, we can move forward. I know we will get into CIP a little bit later in the discussion for sure. But I wanted to start first with general fund expenditures, and that was the first thing that we touched base on and talked about last time was revenues, and then we got into some expenditures. Since that time, I've been able to sit down with the department heads and talk through really their needs for next year, what we can cut back on, but what they also need help with from what we've added into our budget for this year when we talk about the facilities and things to maintain and take care of. So with that, we have projected in FY 2021 $7,248,740 in expenditures. And that was from 2 weeks ago. We talked then that if we were able to reduce expenditures in order to put a couple positions in the budget that were desperately needed, we would try to do that. And so what I've been able to do is talk to the departments about their priorities for next year. We were able to look at various positions that they were needing, and there are 4 positions that we would like to propose, including in next year's budget. 2 are maintenance operators in public works. 1 is a facility operator for the community center, and another is a project coordinator for the engineering department. Each of those positions total about $255,535 for this next fiscal year. We were able to reduce expenditures by $307,025 in cuts that we were able to make to the existing budget, and those are attached on page 5, I believe, of your attachment that you have in your packet. And we can discuss all these things, obviously, at this time, but in general, those are the 2 big things. So that gets our expenditures down to $7,197,250 for next year. Now, one of the things that we just found out recently as of yesterday was we have a health insurance renewal for our employees. And I want to share my screen with you real quick, and I'm going to show you what that insurance renewal is going to look like. Sure, hopefully everybody can see this. So right now we have Blue Cross Blue Shield is our insurer. With our current plan, which is on the far left, you can see that if we renewed everything according to our current plan, that would increase our expenditures by $108,000. If we keep everybody the same in the same categories that they're in currently, it would increase our cost up to $108,000. There's an alternate 1 and an alternate 2, both from Blue Cross. One of the main alternate we talked about with our third-party administrator, our broker, is Willis Towers Watson, is looking at alternate 2. Alternate 2 would basically increase our deductibles from $2,500 and $5,000 to $4,000 and $8,000. It would also increase our out-of-pocket maximums from $3,000 and $6,000 to $5,000 and $10,000. One of the things we have, though, is something called an HRA, and that HRA, the town actually contributes money toward the deductible for the employee, so that the employee now would pay the first $1,000 toward the deductible, and the town would pay the next $1,000. On average, we've been spending around $10,000 in that HRA program the last couple of years, but we ultimately have to put in whatever it winds up being. So if we have a lot of costs for health insurance for that 1 year, we'd have to put in whatever it took to cover those increased costs. But we have been fortunate, and it's been a way for us to keep our costs down. And so I just wanted to bring this to the attention of the board. Certainly we could do the higher deductible plan, but also have an increased risk for the HRA portion from the town's perspective. And it would increase our cost around $25,000, or we could keep the current plan we have. And obviously we would have to add some additional dollars or cut some additional dollars out of the budget to make up for that. So this is something we're going to have to continue to certainly look at closely. And we can have more discussion about it tonight too, but I wanted you to be aware of the fact that we did just get those numbers in yesterday from our insurer. So I guess I will stop there and be happy to try to answer any and all questions from the board. I know I've got some department heads online too that can try to answer anything specific that I can address for you as well.
David, I just wanted to make the statement that I said to you earlier today. I don't, given that our employees are not getting a merit increase, I can't see how we're going to increase their insurance costs on top of that. So I'm not interested in delineating from or diverging from the current plan, even though I know it's a added cost. That's where I stand.
Hey, David, this is Drew.
Okay, Alderman.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we have you.
So I'm kind of where Louise is. I guess, I look at my work for this year, and we got moved to a high deductible plan without choice, and that made me very upset. But as I talked to other people that work with me, they were very excited about it. They thought it worked to their benefit better. Is there a feel for whether employees would like that higher deductible plan, so it gives them something that is a positive, perceived positive to them, and it saves us money? Or would you say the overall feel of town staff is, no, we do not want a higher deductible plan? That's, for me, I didn't want it, but everybody I talked to was excited about it. So I'm not really sure what the temperature would be on that.
We have not discussed it broadly with all employees yet. The main issue is for us is that we do have family coverage. People do pay for family coverage. However, employee plus spouse, and employee plus children, they do not pay a premium, let's say, every month for that coverage. So if the rates go up, then there's typically not an extra charge for people to pay per month based on that. So, for them, it would be more the out of pocket that they would have to pay for the deductible being higher, or their total out of pocket cost being higher as well. So that's, if they were very healthy, then there wouldn't be really any issues. They would have, their typical health choices that they have. However, if they had a serious event or a surgery or a hospitalization, something like that, then obviously it's going to be a lot more money out of their pocket, potentially, if they have something like that occur.
David, it's Mayor. I have to agree with on this. I understand Drew too. I've went through it like he did. He is now, where it was forced on us. But I guess really I have to agree with Vice Mayor Powell.
This is Alderman Pinchot. Does HR have a recommendation? Is Janet Curry there?
Janet is here. We'll see if she can unmute her computer. Here she goes.
I can't get it to, here we go.
We have you, Janet.
You got me up?
Yes.
Okay. One clarification, what we have is really not what they call a high deductible plan, Drew. It's something a little bit different. We're raising the deductibles, but it's still a fully insured plan. I'm sure the employees would prefer less of a deductible than more. This, right now, I would love to stay where we are. That would be my opinion, but then there's the budget balance that we have to do. So I don't know if I really answered your question or not, Alderman Pinchot, but that's where we are.
So you're suggesting stay with the current plan?
That would be the perfect choice, yes. The HRA, the way the HRA works, we could have a very good year, but we have some aging employees and spouses, and so it's kind of like rolling the dice with the HRA, how much that we would end up putting in. But budget-wise, what we know is the numbers on that form. If the HRA went above 10 grand, that's what it's budgeted for, then, we would be over our budget limits.
Thank you for the feedback.
Scott?
David, I guess given her feedback, I would probably fall in line with the mayor and vice mayor and say stick with what we got, use the savings that you cut from expenses, and then maybe grab 50 grand from the general fund to cover it.
This is Scott Meyer. I agree with what Alderman Burnett said.
This Alderman Pinchot, I agree as well. They deserve it.
Sounds like we got a consensus. I think we can probably move on.
Thank you.
All right, that's great. We got several more to get through. That's wonderful. Okay, so next would be positions, and I really wanted to make sure that from a position standpoint that we got all your questions answered and concerns answered. So I guess we can address any and all those at this time as well. just as an FYI, I know all of you've seen this, but the position justifications are all attached to your packet as well.
David, I have no questions. I got an opportunity to speak with you today. You knew I was supportive of that last meeting, that we make sure that we are funding the positions we need to take care of our current responsibilities is very important. So I'm in support. I know that Bud had originally asked for 3, but you guys seem comfortable with 2, so I'm going to leave that one alone. So I'm fine with everything.
This is Alderman Pinchot. I feel the same way, and hopefully within the next 3 to 6 months, things let up. We can always look at that third person.
This is Alderman Burnett. I'm good with what we have. I think my only suggestion would be that we look at the facility operator for the community center and make a wise choice as to when we bring that person on. Not knowing when we're going to open the community center, when it's going to be up and running with normal hours. I don't know that it'd be wise to bring somebody on early and us not be able to use them for up to 6 months potentially. Hopefully it's sooner, but I think if we time that right, we could do that with the opening to the masses and have that person in place then. So maybe holding off 6 months, I guess, is what I'm saying on that position.
I agree. Mayor Williams, I agree with Alderman.
This is Alderman Meyer, and I'm actually not comfortable adding FTE at a time where we are still in the middle of a pandemic and are about ready to open our state and could very well have more dips in revenue, more uncertainty, and I am not happy with my stance, but I sometimes have to make hard decisions, just like you all do too. And so while I want the staff to be able to do their job, I am not comfortable with adding FTE. With that being said, I do understand that the project coordinator actually saves money to the town because my understanding is that that we typically pay about $350,000 in management fees for different projects, and so by bringing on the coordinator in a temporary position for 2 to 3 years, obviously at $85,000 a year is a cost savings. I'm willing to compromise and bring on one public works person. I also am not comfortable bringing on the other 2 at this time. I also think that if the need arises, which right now, if we looked at current state where we're at today, there's not a need for a facility operator for the community center because it's not open. But if the need does arise in the future, I would think that we could, as the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, come back and do a budget amendment at that time to add that position. I'm not comfortable approving 2 of the 4 positions at this time.
David, this is Alderman Pinchot. On the sheet with the yellow and blue lines beside it in the green, you have our deductions, which was $307,000, and then you have $255,000 for these 4 positions. That still leaves us some extra money. Was that going to be allocated to anything in particular?
So the 4 positions were part of yellow, the budget that you see there of the $7,197,250. There was a little bit left over from like around $50,000 or so for $7,248,000 that we started with a couple of weeks ago. But we just talked through the health insurance issue, right? So the health insurance issue would eat all of that up and then some in order to keep up any other savings on top of that.
I guess I lost the number. What was the difference between the current health and the proposed? How much more was it?
It's $108,000.
108. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I'm still in favor for all 4 positions. But I do agree with Drew. We may want to look at bringing on that community center person a little bit later.
Then why can we, sorry to interrupt, but then if that's the case, why can we not approve the budget without that position? And then when the time arises, the staff can come back and present the need. And at that time, we can make an amendment to the budget. Why do we have to build it in now?
One of the
We can always
things,
change it.
I'm sorry. One of the things in marketing, you always want to be ahead of the curve. And if we're going to use that person, the community center, I'm not sure what that community center person totally is going to do. I guess I did not read through carefully all the detailed information of what that position would entail. But will it be mainly towards events, being used towards events, or is that the one that was going to be used in the evenings and weekends?
Right, Ron, I'll give you a shot. Susan, as well. She could probably address anything that I can't answer correctly. But basically, that position would be a full-time position. The park assistants is what we have. That typically they're all part-time, and they work the odd hours that we have, kind of nights and weekends. A few years ago, we hired a full-time park assistant for the outdoors for the different fields, and that's worked well. He's been with us several years now to give us some stability in that area, and then that means we have less hours that are needed for part-time park assistants. The same concept would be here for the community center. So we would have a full-time person at the community center for the nights and at least a Saturday. And then that would limit the number of hours we need for part-time park assistants. It certainly is going to be more expensive to do it that way than just hiring straight part-time park assistants. But usually for those part-time assistants, they're usually college age in the community center, even high school age. People could be there, anybody over the age of 16. So we wanted to have some stability there. I agree that, if we're closed for, weeks or months, whatever the number may be, without being able to have large events and things like that, we certainly don't necessarily need the position right away. But certainly when we get back up and running, I think it's definitely going to be a needed and a valuable position.
Will this person need a lot of training, or can they jump in and within a week or two, a couple of weeks, be ready to go?
I'm going to leave that one for Sue to answer for you, Alderman Pinchot.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That's sort of hard to say. Maybe that if it's someone who's currently working for us, they wouldn't need as much training, but it may take a couple weeks, 3 to 4 weeks for training. I understand what you're saying about the waiting for the community center to fully open, but we sort of expect that to be happening in phases here and not too long. It may look different. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Are you saying you need somebody by July 1st, or if we waited till October 1st, it would still work?
It all depends on what the state allows us and the county allows us to start opening. So I certainly would wait until July to see what the status is and then go from there. But basically, this is a $5 million building with lots of activity on nights and weekends that we are not leaving in the hands of people that are fully invested.
At this point, we could put it in the budget as a place saver, and we don't vote on this until June, so we'll have a little bit more information by then to understand whether we want to take it out or not. So
that's a good point. I agree with that. That's a good point. I like what Scott says. I like what Louise says. We can make the budget with it in there or with it out, and then change it later in the year as we need to. You can always amend. I think Scott was very clear on that. We can do that. As far as a maintenance operator, when Bud tells me that they're currently running at 418 hours of mowing, and we only have 400 hours of capacity, and we're taking on the community center, and we'll soon be taking on the Campbell Station Inn. I'm not sure how we can get by with just one maintenance operator with the mowing that we're going to have to do, and knowing that this also, when we get over into another expenditure item, which will be a mowing machine, because we're down. If you look at what we've got to get there for Bud, we're at the point to where we need to make a decision here. Are we still going to run minus hours as far as capability, or are we going to step up and be able to do the services that people expect, or are we going to back mowing to where we're just mowing every other week and letting the grass get taller, which really requires, for you folks that have mowed, you know that tall grass takes a lot longer to cut than what not so tall grass does. So I'm looking at the negative hours that we've got in Bud's situation, and I think we probably need to look at that. As far as the project coordinator, I think we need that person ASAP, because with Virtue Road coming online, and once they get so far along on that park, we're going to have somebody that's looking after this, and I think that one is pretty critical. And of course, as far as the maintenance operators or the mowing people, we're in mowing season already. So I think it would be good to fund those. Now, as far as the community center facility operator, that's something that's needed. I agree with Sue, but can we hold off, or can we wait and see what the parks people, the state tells us we can do before we pull the trigger on that one? I think that would be something to consider.
And and this is Scott Meyer. I agree with the comments the mayor made, and I like the suggestion that the vice mayor made. Obviously, I think we'll know a lot more in May what happens after we open up the state, and so we still have time to adjust the budget if we need to. So maybe I'm comfortable with putting all four in as a placeholder. I've said my piece. I'm not thrilled about increasing expenses in the middle of a pandemic, but who knows? Maybe the state opens up and people don't get sick and we start using the community center and the parks. I don't think that's likely, but I'm open to have the placeholder of the four positions.
And one of the things that we had originally were trying to do is get the board to approve the budget by the end of May. And I think that given everything that we're going through, I think we can hopefully push off a couple weeks and get it approved that first meeting in June, which will give us a little bit more time to just see what happens for the March numbers, and obviously see just how things are going health-wise in the community. That gives us really 4 more weeks before we've got to really have the final draft budget before you for your consideration. So it sounds like the board's okay with going ahead and keeping the budget, at least right now, for where it's at. And we'll be including the health insurance cost back in. So then the next time we get together, we can talk through that. But I'll share my screen one more time, so that way we can just see the budget together for everyone at home that may be watching. So ultimately, it's hard to show this all on one easy page, but what we've been focusing on here is the general fund expenditures, and the yellow column are those expenditures that are currently $7,197,250. You can see where we have been able to cut back on several line items in the green from different departments. So ultimately, the revenue right now, the revenue over expenditures are right at $3.7 million. We have transfers out of $207,500, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, which ultimately gives us an available fund balance at the bottom of the page of $18,014,493. So with that, I was going to move on to the tourism fund, if everyone's ready to proceed forward there. Let me just real quick.
No questions on the red.
Okay. All right, the tourism fund is in your packet, and that is on page 17, I believe. Yes, page 17. Let me bring that up for you as well. Give me one moment. through these real quick. All right, as the board is aware, the Tourism Fund, we are funding this specifically with starting July 1st with hotel motel tax revenues. I know that obviously the tourism area has been really decimated by the pandemic that we're going through right now, not with just retail being shut down, but obviously the hotels you're seeing with the safer at home orders all around the country that people aren't traveling right now. So we had initially anticipated getting around $25,000 a month in revenues through the tax. That's, I think certainly, and that was supposed to start collections on June 1st, which would then be remitted to the town on July 1st. I know the hotels have reached out to the board about delaying the initial implementation of the tax. And so I know that's a discussion we need to have tonight. I would just make observation that this budget was put in place before all of the pandemic occurred. So any kind of changes to the tax that we make, which would then reduce revenues, we would obviously need to make expenditure cuts to that as well. So with that, I will open it up for comments and suggestions from the board on what you'd like to do with the tourism plan for this next FY 2021 year.
Okay, this is Mayor Williams. I'll start. I talked with the hotels, and they would be really happy if we were to delay this for 90 days. They think in that period of time they'll be in way better shape, and it would be a little bit to help them. And I think that's a great idea. That would put it to September, and which would be we would collect in say October on what they would have then. But anyway, they would be very appreciative if we would look at a 90-day delay.
This is Alderman Pinchot. That goes along with what I've been thinking as well, so I agree with that.
This is Vice Mayor Pavlin.
Yeah, Alderman.
Sorry, Drew. Go ahead, Drew.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I agree. That's exactly what I was looking at, and it's certainly at that point we could reconsider. If I'm figuring that we're not going to see anything come of our tourism, it's going to build up again, and hopefully by that time we'll see something going. So I agree. September 1st seems reasonable to me.
Scott Meyer.
Alderman,
I agree.
I agree. Go ahead, Scott. I'll bring up Dan. Go ahead.
See, I can see you all, but I don't think you can see me, so I'll try to watch you all. Scott Meyer, I agree.
Okay.
Scott, how come we're not on your picture? How come it's just sound?
Because my administrative assistant isn't here to help me, so sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm rejoining though, so you can see it's okay. I'm nothing to look at, so you're good.
Okay, as long as you're.
I can hear y'all. Yeah.
Okay, you're getting everything. Great.
All right, Alderman Burnett here, unless Tom Hale wants to jump in front of me, or I'm kidding. I'm good. I agree with the 90-day extension. I think that it would help them, and I think it'd be a good move for us to show we're continuing to work with them.
Okay, well, if everybody sounds like everybody's in agreement with the 90-day suspension of that, so we will actually need to get an ordinance in front of you at the next meeting, and you'll need to approve 2 readings of the ordinance in May to delay that in the 90 days, so that it does not go into effect on June 1st, but will be then September 1st going into place. Excuse me. Yes, September 1st going into place. Okay, the next, and we will get you a revised expenditure budget on the tourism program as well, based off those numbers. Next would be the State Street Aid Fund. The State Street Aid Fund is on page 18 of your packet. We've got actually tonight's regular board meeting. We've got the bids for this year's resurfacing program, which is mostly what we use to do use our State Street Aid money for. This year, you can see estimated in FY20, we have about 1.287 million proposed. Now, part of that is that we always go back and forth between 2 budget cycles on budgeting and then also when it's expensed. So in this, like we're about to do, we're about to approve a contract in late April. If they went out and knocked out all the resurfacing in May, then we would pay it all out in this fiscal year. But typically what happens is they do a little bit in this fiscal year and they do a little bit in next fiscal year. So that's why we always have some monies being spent in both fiscal years based off what we are putting in place. So what we have proposed for FY21 is 850,000 in revenue with 800,000 in resurfacing. Obviously the monies that we have right now will go, some of that will go towards that, but we have a fund balance at the end of this year estimated at around $1.3 million in state street aid. Any questions about state street aid while we're here?
I have a question. Do we transfer, we have traditionally transferred from general funds some monies into this account. Is that correct?
We have done some transfers of general fund monies to state street aid. In fact, we did the last one in 19. We did not do any this year in 20. And one of the main reasons is that we started getting more revenues from the gas tax that was coming to us. You know, the state issued the Improve Act just a couple of years ago. So we've steadily seen those increases in revenues go from around, I want to say 650,000 to now around 850,000 estimated this year. So we've seen quite a bit of an increase. And so we were able to dial back the monies from general fund to state street aid. We can always go back and put in dollars from general fund if you feel the need, or we have a large project, let's say 1 year that we really need to get accomplished and we need additional dollars, then we can put more money toward that.
Okay, in that vein, I always talk about how we matured in the late 80s and early 90s, and we have a lot of neighborhoods that are going to come up due for repaving and at around the same time frame. Do we have a long-range plan to understand the mileage that's going to need to be paved in the far future, in the next decade or so that if we do need to start contributing, we can start kind of building that fund up better? Do we? I don't even know if we look at it that way.
And I don't know if Daryl is on the call tonight or not, but I know that typically what the engineering department does is they have a series of streets that they go and evaluate each and every year. When they look at those streets, they categorize them as, you know, hey, we got to do these this year, and then they have another set for the next year and the next year. So I don't necessarily think we go out, say, a 10-year cycle, but we certainly go out, say, 2 to 3 years and try to gauge, okay, what are the streets that we need to do? I think there's no doubt we could probably do more streets than we are right now. There definitely would probably be a need for that. However, you know, with the budget the way it is, we try to stay within that state street aid dollars. But definitely, if we need to go look a little harder and longer time frame for that, we can.
I think, and along with what I've advocated for the stormwater infrastructure, these are the things that are going to really tax us in the future and be things that are going to probably beyond our terms and into the next boards that have to take this on. And we just need to be cognizant that we've moved into maintenance mode and a lot of things need to be maintained. We've got a lot of balls in the air that need to be maintained, from our stormwater and our streets and our buildings, and it's all aging, and the parks, the equipment, the sidewalks, so there's a lot that's kind of brewing, and I just want to make sure that we're aware of that and we're thinking about that. So that's all I had.
Mayor Williams, Louise is correct. That is something we're going to have to look after. And as the gasoline tax starts to increase, like what the governor said it would, whenever he put it in effect, one of my questions to him was, how quick would we start seeing a difference? And he really thought by 2022 that we would start seeing a big jump in what we would actually get money wise from the Improve Act. we really do need to kind of watch. The only street that I've had complaints about, and and there is one street in our town that we've had complaint, or that I have. I'm not sure about the rest of you. Maybe Scott and Louise has as well, but that's Union Road.
All the time.
That's my.
Yeah. Union Road's an issue, obviously, but I don't get complaints on anything else. Do you, Vice Mayor?
The only complaints I had were the ones we resolved last year because Gross Shart was in really, really bad condition for whatever it was, mysterious thing, and it really wasn't scheduled to be repaved, but it was just had degraded so much that it needed to be addressed. So yeah, I haven't heard much of anything. Daryl does they do a great job of keeping up on it, and I'm not complaining about that. I just know that, like everything else, once you hit that maintenance mode, you don't want to get behind, because once you're playing catch up, it's just a constant pressure. So it's just something that we just need to keep an eye out on. So.
Okay. If there are no further comments on that item, wanted to move on to the equipment replacement fund. And this is where we put all of our equipment, vehicles, major machinery, things that we need. Mostly you think about vehicles here for staff and also for public works facilities that they have. I want to give you the schedule this time, and this is a 10-year schedule that we have implemented with it. It's kind of hard to see maybe on the screen. I've got it about as big as I think I can get it.
David, what page is that?
It's going to be on page
20. I think it's 20.
Yes. Yep. Sorry about that. Page 20. And we're currently in FY20. We're looking at FY 2021 for equipment. And as you can see, there's not a lot of equipment that we are going to be purchasing next year, but I did want to touch base on a couple, and I've got Mr. Mcphee on the line. He can certainly answer questions about some of the specifics of these things. One is we need to upgrade and get a new skid steer loader. That isn't a small amount of money for that. And the last one we bought it was in 2006, so we've got about 14 years of service out of that. But they use it constantly in public works, and that's around $74,000. We've also got a 2015 John Deere 997 mower for $20,000. Again, this is one that they use every single day at all the various parks. The new equipment that needs to go with the new employees with Public Works are another John Deere mower. It's a 4-wheel drive unit that's a 72-inch deck for $40,750, and also an Exmark walk-behind mower that they really get and use on the very, very steepest slopes that we've got in and around town for right at $7,500. And then 2 vehicles. One is a replacement vehicle, and that is for a Ford F-250 4-wheel drive with a plow at $40,000. And you can imagine plowing means you're putting salt out a lot and you're moving a lot of stuff. We put salt bins in the back of these F-250s, so they get a lot of rust and things going on underneath those. So that truck's really seen its better days. And then finally, the project coordinator truck that we talked about for engineering. This would just be a 2-wheel drive truck, something very, very lightweight, but able to get them to job sites around town. So total of all purchases next year are scheduled to be $208,240. We plan on transferring in $157,500 from the general fund, and that would give us an ending balance next year of $891,353 in the equipment replacement fund. I think those are my final thoughts on the fund. We are well funded in the equipment replacement fund as long as we continue with our schedule in future years. And then we only replace things, even though it may come up on the schedule. Bud evaluates that every year to determine whether or not it really needs to be replaced. And so there's several things on here that we've moved out many times because they just didn't need to be replaced yet. They still have a good useful life. And so that certainly saved us some money as well over the years.
Mr. Williams, I got a question for Bud. Any idea of what we can recoup on the used equipment from when we put it on .gov? Typically, what kind of percentage?
Depends on the age. We just sold everything this past winter that we had collected last year, and I can't remember off the top of my head, and Allison might be able to guess at it as to what we got off of Gov Deals. I'm going to say the Ford F-250 replacement, we're probably going to look at somewhere in the neighborhood of about 8,000 to 9,000 on that truck. The skid loader, 15,000, 15 to 18 on Gov Deals. The mower, I'm going to say in the neighborhood of 5,000 to 7,000.
Mayor, Allison just let me know that this past year we received $31,500 back from the Gov Deals sales that we made. And so all the sales that we do get wind up going right back into the equipment replacement bottom line. So all that money continues to stay in this fund, so that way we can replace other things in the future.
Great. That sounds what I wanted to know. That sounds good. Thanks.
Hey, Bud, Drew here. Just a question for you about the machinery, about the John Deere, and then looking at the Exmark. Is there any possibility of doing a 72-inch Exmark that, you know, maybe in the 10 to 12,000 range as opposed to the 40 for the John Deere, or does that John Deere do a lot more than the Exmark does that I just don't know about?
Well, Exmark is just a brand name, as John Deere is a brand name. What we need with that mower, we need the four-wheel drive capability. So if I buy a Exmark and four-wheel drive capability with a 72-inch deck, it's going to be comparable price-wise to the John Deere. You know, just one brand to the other. We put it out to bid. I don't ask for brand name. I put out a specific spec with no brand names, horsepower, mowing width, four-wheel drive, you know, and then they just bid what they have. You know, Toro could bid, John Deere could bid, or Exmark could bid.
Gotcha. Okay, that helps. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions about the equipment replacement fund? If not, we'll move on. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I said no for me.
All right, our next fund is the insurance fund. Now, this fund is basically a closed retirement account for very few employees that were here several years ago. As you can see, we have not had to put in any money into this fund in several years. We have limited expenses out from the fund as well. So again, this year, we do an actuarial study every year to determine if there's any money we do need to put in. And I do not believe they've come back and said we need to do that this next year. So we are good for just keeping this status quo again for this next year. All right, our next fund is the ADA Capital Projects Fund. And this fund, if the board recalls, we did a transition plan just a couple years ago now to look at all the assets that we have in town that need to be improved up to ADA standards. We have done I think a really good job with several large projects and getting things accomplished pretty quickly on this. We were able to do the Anchor Park restroom facility and all the walkways around there to allow people to get to the soccer field and the baseball field safely. We've also been able to right now work on the restrooms here at Town Hall to get those ADA compliant. And we're going to be doing quite a bit of ADA improvements actually with the State Street Aid Fund this year. Whenever you repave a road, then anything along that repavement area, if let's say crosswalks or sidewalks that have ramps that need to be improved, have to be brought up to ADA standards too. So we're going to get quite a bit done this year. So in this fund for this year, instead of putting $150,000 in order to save some money going out of general fund, we are only going to transfer $50,000. But again, we've got plenty of projects going on to meet our requirements there for ADA funding. Any questions or concerns about ADA funding before we move on to the CIP?
Nope.
Okay, with CIP, I know we had some discussion last time, be able to kind of go back and forth on CIP. I have not made any changes because I knew we needed to have further discussion on CIP and determine where we're at. Typically, and I'll just kind of go over this a little bit of what we did last time. Typically, we put in $2 million a year from the general fund to the CIP fund. This year, based on all the situation that we're dealing with the pandemic and our finances, we're looking at zeroing out the FY 2021 budget for CIP and moving some projects out and around in order to really limit the amount of money we're putting in for next year. Obviously, for FY 20, which is the current year that we're in, we have quite a bit of projects that we're undertaking right now, about to undertake, and we'll be very busy all throughout next year just catching up on those projects. So anything that we add back to the budget, if there is a need to and a desire to, I think we could do certainly in a limited capacity if possible. So I'm going to show you the bottom line here. Looks like at the end of 2021, which would be where the one yellow column is. And let's see if I can draw on this. It may help if I can see this. Hang on. So at the bottom line here is 2021, and that shows that we're going to have around $982,000 left in the CIP fund at the end of 2021. And with all the other funds, you can see over a 5-year period what's placed in the CIP currently. We have a positive balance in available fund balance for the CIP. Future years assumes that we're putting in $2 million a year into the CIP for those different projects. And certainly the only fund, I think everybody knows this, but the only time that we budget for CIP is in the current fiscal year that we're in. The other future years, so FY 2022 on out, are all based on projections and budgets, and those can change. Obviously, we try to keep with it as best we can, but sometimes numbers change or projects change, priorities change, and we can move things forward or backwards depending on the board's prerogative there. So with that, I will be happy to try to answer any questions or and talk through any changes that you would like to make. Sorry about that.
Well, hey, Allison or David, were you able to get the numbers for how much more we would need to finish the Watt Road crosswalk?
Yes, Allison was able to work on that today. So we had the Watt Road crosswalk and the Grisby Chapel crosswalk were both projects together this year. I'll try to find where those are at here. They may have actually been in last year's budget.
They were
19. Yeah, that's right. So we had the two projects combined. Let me just give you those numbers together. We're right at $195,000 that we had budgeted. I think the board recalls we budgeted those two projects together. We bid them out. It came in about $100,000 over budget, so we couldn't move forward. we've decided to go back and look at the Grigsby Chapel project, and we're working on bidding that out currently. I think, in fact, the bids are already on the street for that. We'll try to get that back soon. So what we have left once that project is done is right at $148,000 for left available to go toward Watt Road pedestrian crossing. But we think that project's going to cost around $260,000. So we're going to be about a little over $110,000 short if we move forward on the Watt Road project.
Okay.
David, did you say that what we had turned down was a total of $280,000 to do both projects?
Yes, it was 200. I want to say it was 85,000 to do both projects. We only had 195,000 budgeted for both projects.
But it sounds like what you're saying we would need now to do the Watt Road project equals way more than the 280 we got budgeted. Did I not hear that correctly?
No, you did. That's correct. Watt Road project has mast arms with signals, has a sidewalk heading up to, I think, Sedgefield and Orchid Grove subdivisions. And it's a very busy street. You've got a lot of volume of traffic with difficult, I think, visibility for motorists to see pedestrians crossing the road there. And I think the idea is to get them safely across toward the northern part of the park area near the northern park. We're talking about Mayor Bob Leonard Park connection. And so looking at that project overall, we estimate that just the Watt Road project alone would cost around $260,000.
But we had a quote for 280 to do both of them?
I'd have to go back and look at the.
I'm saying, like,
yeah, I see what you're saying. I need to go back and look at the bids, Alderman Burnett, but let us go back and look at that, and we can get with you in probably next meeting and get that cleared up. Maybe even this meeting if I can get Allison to help me out on that.
This is Alderman Pinchot. I've got a question. We split the Watt Road project into two parts: sidewalk separate from the crosswalk. Would that be doable to get at least the sidewalk done right away and have a crosswalk, but not the expensive project we're looking at as far as with the lights and everything for the crosswalk? But could we split that up possibly? Does that make sense to do that?
Well, it would make sense if, our crews could do part of the work. I'm not sure that they can. There's a little bit of grading that would have to be involved with the sidewalk work. So it's not as simple as just laying it on flat ground. I'd have to get with, again, Bud and find out what he thought on that. But ultimately, the crosswalk, we need to make sure it's safe. And I think I would defer to our engineering department on that to determine what's the safest way to get people across that road. Because although it's, it's supposed to be, I think, 40 miles an hour, they typically go a little higher out there.
Yeah.
Drew, that you're right. That I pulled up my agenda from last week or last couple weeks ago. The low bid was $279.45. So if this is going to be 280 to do on its own, or 260 to do on its own, I wish I had understood that better and not rejected that bid. This is one of the things that I get it, that we've got to push something off. And I have my own feelings, and you all know, and I can go through that later, but this crosswalk is a safety issue, and we should not be putting it off. We should, if this is the thing that needs to be done. But let me go through what my statement is, and then I can have my say, and we can move along with our day.
Louise, I agree with you, and I agree with Drew. I think if we'd have realized that somebody else wanted approximately 260,000 just to do Watt Road, then we would have gladly accepted the 279 to do both.
Yeah, I'm frustrated with myself that these were questions I didn't ask last time. But let me go ahead through my statement. Smith Road sidewalk was approved for funding in the fiscal year 2018 budget, and Watt Road crosswalk was approved for funding in the fiscal year 2019 budget.
These are on the street real nice.
McPhee Park was originally a $6 million project, and it jumped to an $8 million project this year. McPhee Park, including the base project and tennis complex, was approved in the fiscal year 2020 budget. In the current budget, both the Smith Road sidewalk and the Watt Road crosswalk have been defunded, yet the McPhee Park project remains fully funded. And I can't understand why there is no room for compromise. We have 60 days to finalize any change in our decision regarding McPhee Park. We can back off alternative 2 and go with just the base bid or base bid with alternate 1. I'll remind you of a few things. The tennis complex was never ranked the most important project for McPhee Park. According to the survey, the most important amenities in descending order were restrooms, natural surface trails, walking asphalt trails, disc golf, playground, picnic facility, open space, dog park, small lake, outdoor fitness park, rectangular fields, and amphitheater. All of these came before the tennis and pickleball courts. The base bid includes many amenities that the community indicated they value, including restrooms, walking asphalt trails, picnic facilities, and open space. Further, we currently offer pickleball at the community center. A handful of neighborhoods have converted their courts to pickleball courts. Our community includes at least 22 tennis courts located in the neighborhoods in Farragut, which, anecdotally speaking, are not utilized. Further, we offer basketball at the community center at Anchor Park and a hoop at Mayor Bob Leonard Park. I'll point this out to indicate that a tennis complex at McPhee Park is somewhat of a redundancy. Meanwhile, we're removing the funding for a safety project, the missing link in the trail system, which has always ranked high importance in community surveys. It's not fair that these projects are being sacrificed to provide infrastructure that already exists in the town. Additionally, it is our duty as the board to continue, and I'm moving on to this, to fund the Stormwater Fund. Stormwater is going to cost millions when it's all said and done. We should be putting more in this fund, not removing funding from it. And finally, although this is not CIP, to assist our businesses, we need to allocate some funds to a marketing and advertising program for our businesses as they work to recover from the economic shutdown. This marketing effort should mostly benefit the businesses who were deemed non-essential and forced to close to deal with this pandemic. As a small business owner, I can attest that marketing and advertising dollars are always in need, and sometimes the first thing cut. A coordinated marketing effort, both print and social media, highlighting our business districts would give our businesses the visibility and boost they need. We can talk about that later. And I understand that I'm probably in the minority when it comes to how we're going to fund McPhee Park, but that Watt Road crosswalk is a safety issue, and I can live with maybe pushing off this missing link, although I think it's very important to the community around it. They have been looking forward to having that for years as well. This safety project, we need to figure out how to build that back into the budget, as well as the stormwater. We should not be taking money, not putting money into that stormwater infrastructure fund. That is going to cost us millions of dollars when it's said and done. So those are the two things that I'm very concerned about. That's all I had to say.
Louis, how much, sorry, I'm on mute. Yeah, I'm not. I definitely see a need to get people across Watt Road. The only thing I struggled with was how expensive it is and who it serves, like how many people it serves. When I look at Greenway connecting Smith Road, man, that serves a ton of neighborhoods and a ton of people. But when I think about the money spent for that crosswalk, I want them to get safely across, but $260 or whatever, $250, whatever that number is, $1,000, is it serving more than a neighborhood or two? Whereas the other Greenway is serving, it's a very, very important connection in our Greenway system and sidewalk system.
Well, you are seeing people that come in through Sedgefield from over off of Union Road, because Sedgefield, when you come through Sedgefield and you go to their tennis court, that is a cut through there for pedestrians. You can't cut through by car. but all of that pool area has a parking lot on either side. So a lot of people will go in there and come out that way and go up through Sedgefield to go over to, they can go over to Watt Road from there. I understand your point, but people are crossing there. Whether we make it safe or not, they're going to cross there. And someone loses their life there. It's at this point, we're seeing so much more traffic on Watt Road. This is something that we talked about and we budgeted for. If the mast arm is not the way to go, if we need to take another look at that project to figure out what's visible, is there a cost savings that we can make but still make it visible? I'm certainly up for talking through that, but it's a safety issue that I think we really do need to address.
So this is Alderman Meyer. I was looking at some numbers. So it appears to me over the past couple of years, we've averaged in the available fund balance after the years ended somewhere around 14 to 15 million. And so right now, the revised budget has about 18 million. I would be comfortable in moving about 1.5 million out of the general fund available fund balance and using that money, if I do my math right, if we had 1.5 coming in, then we would use 650,000 back for the Smith Road because Alderman Burnett has nailed it. The folks in the north have waited long enough. There's a missing link, and I think that missing link being filled would connect multiple subdivisions. So I think that's absolutely necessary. We could put 500,000-ish back for some kind of Watt Road work, and then $350,000 should go into the stormwater. If I do my math right, I think that's about 1.5 million. That would bring us down to 16.5 million left over in the general fund, and I would be comfortable with that.
Mayor Williams, you're good, man. I have to agree with you on this overall. The Grigsby Chapel is a safety issue that's been needing to be done for quite some time. The Watt Road does serve less people than Smith Road, so that's very agreeable there. Watt Road has a lower crossing that a lot of people walk across. I see more there than up on the other end, but I'm sure that there will be a lot of people that would be using it if it was there. One of the things that I asked was if we could not use a mast arm that would be taken down whenever we start doing the red lights, and I'm not sure what the schedule is from cannon to cannon as far as getting all that laid out, but and that's a grant, so that mast arm that would be coming down, we could use there on Watt Road. And that.
May I just interrupt with you, because I spoke to Daryl about that to see if there would be a mast arm available, and he does not believe that's the case, that they won't be replacing mast arms from his understanding. So that's something we need clarity on.
That's for sure. I was understanding that there would be two mast arms.
Can I be heard? Can I be heard?
Yes, I hear Daryl.
Yes. I am there. Sorry, folks. Was having a hard time getting connected there. Thank you, Allison. Couple of points. It's my understanding there will not be any mast arms or poles available with that project. We're not replacing any with that project.
Daryl, are you talking about the CMAC project?
The CMAC project, that's correct.
Okay.
That was originally penciled in. Was that something that they decided wasn't needed?
I don't know where it was penciled in. I apologize. I'm not aware that there was ever any projected leftover poles.
Okay.
Our intent is not to replace any of the mast arms that are out there.
Okay. Well, I was understanding there were two, but if not, then that option's out.
All right.
Still on?
Yes, I wanted to also comment. There was a question earlier, and I was feverishly trying to connect here. Question about the Watt Road crossing, the pedestrian crossing with beacons. As far as, I understand Alderman Burnett's question about the why are we budgeting $260,000 when our original bid was $271,000. The fact is, we don't know what the bids would come in at in rebidding that project as a separate project. We're looking at our two lowest bids, picking a point somewhere in the middle, and subtracting what we think we can do the Grigsby Chapel project for. So typically, bid together, you can do it a little cheaper, but most likely we're going to be looking at about $260,000 for the Watt Road pedestrian crossing.
Hey, Daryl, Scott Meyer. So could you do Watt Road and Grigsby Chapel together for $500,000?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we just had a bid for $271,000.
Okay. So I guess getting back to my original comment, we've averaged about $4.5 million over the last 3 years in available fund balance. So I'm comfortable with coming in at 16.5 as for this budget year, because that's obviously higher than the average. I still think the 1.5 million would get us, and maybe we bring it down to 1.25 or maybe 1.3 million, but that would get us the Watt Road, the Grigsby Chapel, $350,000 for the stormwater, which I believe is essential, and a bit careless if we don't actually put some money back in the stormwater, and then also the $650,000 for the Smith Road.
And Alderman, if I can just make a quick comment here. We had a hard bid on the Grigsby Chapel Watt Road. For just the Watt Road portion was around $216,000. So I think if you want to move forward with a project like that, we would probably be looking, I would think just a little bit above that, but just to have a little bit of a cushion. But roughly 216 was that, and then the rest was Grigsby Chapel, and so that's what we're trying to work on now is the Grigsby Chapel project. So certainly,
I'm sorry,
much less than that.
I'm sorry, David. So the Watt Road, I thought that was defunded.
It was, but when they did the bids, they broke them up into two different areas so we could see what the numbers were. So that's why I feel much better about that being a lot less than maybe what we're projecting. But I think we need to work with contractors and we can also see what we can do to maybe change that project up if we need to still have a safe project, but hopefully one that's a little bit less expensive. The other thing I wanted to let everybody
out then. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, the other thing I was going to let everybody know is that we also have money coming back from FEMA this year. And so the FEMA money that we have is going to be right at $273,000. That money will go back into the stormwater funding for CIP. So that'll help tremendously in getting us more done for capital projects in the future.
Well, I would propose moving up 1.3 million, then if I do my math right, out of the 18 million that's budgeted for the available fund balance. And again, that would get us $650,000 for Smith Road, $350,000 for Storm, and then maybe around 300,000-ish for Watt Road / Grigsby Chapel. If I do my math right, I think that's 1.3 million. It's been a long day.
Okay, let me make this suggestion. If we're getting 273 back from FEMA and that goes straight into stormwater and we have 750 in there now, although something's coming out for whatever we've got going on, have we taken any money out for what we've done so far?
Yes, and so what we have left for construction purposes is right at $323,000.
Okay.
So the 323 to the 273, that gives you basically how much we could take moving forward for construction or further study, because obviously the study work that CEC is doing now is it's limited, and we need to do more.
Agreed 100%.
It's 596 that you're back. Okay, that's not bad.
That makes me comfortable.
I'm okay with that. That solves all my problems.
Same here.
Now, the other silver lining in the CIP is that there's also state of Tennessee has grant funding this year for capital projects. I think we have a really good shot at getting right at $536,000 for one of our projects this year. And so again, what that will do is help put in that much more money into the bottom line of the CIP by the end of next year. Certainly, we have to get approved for the funding. We have to find out what the parameters are for the funding and then get it. And so sometime during the FY21 year, I would anticipate having those dollars come to us. But that will definitely be a help to the CIP bottom line.
Was I under the impression those applications were due out this week?
They are due the 30th, or excuse me, they're going to be out the 30th. They've already sent out the information. And so what we're going to do is have a resolution for the board to approve at your May meeting. So we can go ahead and get that in as soon as possible to the state of Tennessee, so we can get it in the queue for the review as soon as they can.
When on the resolution?
I would hope to get that done the first meeting in May. We've got Mr. Hobbs working on that application right now and the resolution. So I think we'll definitely have that to you at your May meeting.
Great.
Sounds good.
Okay, any other discussion or questions about the CIP? Comments?
Sounds like we've worked through it.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm hearing everyone correctly and going through this. The idea is to keep obviously our current funds and current CIP that we've got moving forward, but for FY 2021 to look at adding up to an additional 1.3 million in general fund transfers to the CIP, to look at 300,000 roughly. We'll look at the final numbers for Watt Road pedestrian crossing, another 300 to 350 for stormwater, and then another 650 moving the Smith Road sidewalk from 2022 back into 2021 to get that funded. Does that seem accurate to everyone?
Yes.
Alderman Meyer, yes.
Alderman Pinchot, yes.
Louise Pavlin, yes.
Drew Burnett, yes.
Mayor Williams, yes.
All right, so those are most of our major issues for the budget. And I know we had talked about the opportunity to work with businesses and trying to help the business community out. And I asked Town Attorney Tom Hale to look into the legal aspects of what can we as a municipality in the state of Tennessee do to really, if we wanted to help local businesses more than just through our necessary ordinances that we have and things that make things as business friendly as possible, from a monetary standpoint, what are the things that we could do to help in that regard? So I'm going to have Tom just jump in and kind of talk us through from the TCA and Tennessee Constitution what we can and can't do. Tom, take it away once you unmute there.
How about this? Good. I don't know if you have had the opportunity to review the memo that I sent on mid-afternoon today that outlines sort of an overall context and framework for this discussion, but you have it in your email. And when you have a chance to look at it, you might want to take a gander. as you've heard me say, probably more than you want to hear me say it, we are limited in what we can do based upon what the statutes of the state of Tennessee allow us to do. And we have express powers and we have implied powers that come from those express powers. There is no, I think that I will sort of introduce this by saying this one thing. We've never had anything like this in the history of our lives. And so I'm not going to probably be able to find too many situations where government has acted in a situation like this one. So we don't have much case authority. We do have some statutes that give us some assistance in understanding what we can do. One statute that we have relied on before in making appropriations to nonprofit charitable organizations and nonprofit civic organizations is outlined in the memo. It's TCA 654-111. And it is one of the means by which most local governments fund those type of entities. And that is probably the most direct way that we could handle providing some assistance to local businesses that have been impacted. David asked me to look specifically at a couple of things, couple of ideas about changing the tax structure for beer and liquor. And I have studied those statutes, and it's difficult to figure out how that might be done in a way that provides anything other than potentially some benefit to only those entities that have need to pay those taxes. And to a large degree, there are not very many of them. A couple of the taxes that I looked at, as outlined in the memo, we share that money with the state of Tennessee, and it's a state tax. I don't think we could modify that. And so I don't know how we get the benefit to the taxpayer from those two taxes. There is one tax that is, we charge a fee, an inspection fee up to 8%, up to 8%. So I suppose you could lower that tax to some degree and benefit the entities that pay or are subject to that tax. Not sure that that really is what you have in mind. We've been looking around for other municipalities to see what they do or have done in this regard. And David, I had a couple. I think Blount County is doing something similar to what you're talking about, but they're doing it through the Blount Partnership. And then Knox County is doing something similar through the United Way. David referred me to a Columbia, South Carolina program that is fairly well developed and is a little bit more in line with what it strikes me you would be wanting to do. And what it is it focuses on the businesses that were not able to get the PPP loans, that have specific issues that are impacting their ability to continue, that they can demonstrate, and any other criteria that you would want to bring into it. Provide funding to a civic organization or a charitable organization that we have connections with, develop the program and ask them to to administer the program and make judgments about the people that would be granted the right to use those funds, or the opportunity to use those funds. That seems to be the least, that one's got the least amount of risk, because it would be available to everybody that fits in the category. All of the categories would be, people that are suffering some direct hardship and are different than some of the other businesses that have been able to get the PPP loans, or that are not about to close because of financial issues. You can tailor it to fit the people that really have need, and it's done through an entity that we would have the right to provide funding to under that statute. So it wouldn't be quite as controversial than trying to do something specific, like impacting a tax rate or something like that. So that's more or less a summary of what we were able to come up with as we started looking at this. I'm not sure exactly what you individually had in mind for what you wanted to do, but anytime you're going to use public money, I'm not telling you anything you don't know better than I. You're going to be subject to a lot of criticism if you're not doing it in a way that is viewed as fair and admirable and really attempting to help people that are in need. So I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Hey, Tom, Alderman Meyer here. So I've not got a chance to look at your memo yet, but what you described in Columbia, I think you said Columbia, South Carolina, resonates with me a lot. And the intent is really just to be able to help those businesses in the town, at least from my perspective, is to help those businesses in the town of Farragut that have not been able to take advantage of other opportunities, funding opportunities from the federal government or from the state. And it would be definitely supporting them in a hardship situation, knowing full and well that they would, if they just had a little assistance, that their business would survive, and we had a hand in helping them, and then they have a bright future and thrive that way. So I know just for me, that was my intention.
You will be probably not to know that the PPP application process is very, very complicated, and it takes a lawyer and an accountant together to figure out how to do it. And then once you do it, they change the rules about 3 times before you get it finalized. So the effect of that is that a lot of the smaller business people that it was probably intended to try to help didn't have the wherewithal or the capacity to take advantage of it. And so
what I've heard,
there's a lot of them out there that really are probably hurting, that could really benefit from something. It doesn't need to be, in some instances, a whole lot of money for some small businesses. If they just can they can just pay their note payment or their rent for 2 or 3 months, it would make all the difference in the world to them. So
that's exactly what I was thinking. And I've had the same feedback from small business owners that the PPE application was insane, and they asked me to help them fill it out, and I am in no way able to do it. So that was really my intent, was to figure out a way, at your point, even if it's just a couple of $1,000s, to help them build back up their inventory, or like you said, Tom, maybe to pay a note. It's a nominal amount. I'm not looking to make any small business become rich. I'm just wanting to figure out a way that we could extend a helping hand for a one-time payment to help them get back on their feet when, once again, the federal government, I think, maybe had good intentions, but, as the federal government always does, they create a lot of red tape, and it's extraordinarily difficult for folks to get some of those monies, not all of them, but some of them, and it's very discouraging. And so again, I'm just looking for a helping hand to some of our small businesses who can't take advantage of those complicated applications. So.
This is Vice Mayor Poplin. Tom, you forgot to add, once you figure out how to apply and get it applied, by the time it's processed, all the money's run out. So, which is what we learned, we ran into. We finally got our loan approved and there is no money in the account for them to send to us. But I agree with you. I think herein lies the problem with that. If we're looking at the chamber to possibly do that, they don't have the manpower, I don't think, to process this. In essence, in theory, I think it's a great idea, but when the devil is always in the details, and setting up the criteria, and then the application process, and how detailed we need to be to understand what their finances are, who's going to review all that, because we have to, I mean, it's just like we think they're doing a good thing and we end up giving Ruth Chris $50 million. It's not, the same thing where you're giving people that don't need it are just taking advantage of the system because you've not delineated what you need from them. And then someone's got to do all that research, and that's the hard part. And I talked to my husband about this because we own Anytime Fitness, and we were talking back and forth about how would you help? And that's when we came up with the marketing or advertising program, because a marketing and advertising program directed particularly at the businesses that were deemed non-essential, that had to close their doors, would be a helpful thing to have. Because typically in a business, when you're stressed, that is one of the first things you cut is your marketing and your advertising budget, because it's an easy thing to just lop off. But it is vitally important to be out there and having a presence, especially when we're coming back online, to remind everybody that you're there. So there's two opportunities that we need to talk about. Which one do we want to pursue, and how complicated it can get either way? Because if you're doing it, it's easy for me to say a marketing program, advertising program. What does that look like? Is it social media? Is it print? Who is going to run that program? What are our requirements for it? So either way you go, either way we decide, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made. But I do think we need to reach out to our small businesses in our town that are hurting and demonstrate that they're valuable to us. So
Mayor Williams, I agree with Louise and Scott in different ways. I think Louise's ideal as far as the marketing is top priority, because she is exactly correct. When you have to cut, you cut that first, as opposed to an employee or anything else, and because they're usually the bottom of your cut barrel. The top of it is the marketing and advertising. If we can do social media, and we can do some partnership with the press. I've talked with numerous banks about the 90-day grace periods on loans, and for both the principal and interest, and they are really up for that. I think they're helping a lot of people with that, from what I've been told. Mm-hmm. We've worked with on the signs, and I think we need to help even more in that area. I had one particular restaurant person that was a sign, and they put a sign out, and that week was a $10,000 boost in their sales that week. And I think there's little things that can help but most definitely, and here's something to throw out there, and I'm not talking to anybody about this, but we have a tourism coordinator that right now tourism is kind of a little slow, and she's pretty social media savvy, or I know that office is, and maybe she could lend a hand on getting some of this out, and maybe help in an area that we need help with. That's my 2 cents.
Mayor Williams, to add on to what you said, just doing a little research and talking to people, that is one of the things that tourism, the typical tourism groups are doing. They turn internally when something like this happens, when a natural disaster happens, they turn to getting their local community engaged and understanding what's available to them. So I think it would be, I think our Visit Farragut is teed up to do exactly this, because Karen has put together the list of all the restaurants. She put that together in a Excel type sheet, and then she did that for the fitness facilities. And I believe she has it for some of the businesses that were open as well, that were providing some curbside pickup. And so there's something there already. They've already, when they did the what was that, Children's Defense Fund came in last year, they had put together a map that separated us out by 5 districts. You could do do some kind of program where we highlight a district each time, like for 2 weeks. We highlight particularly the businesses that are the ones that were deemed non-essential, make sure that they're getting a lot of attention. There's an opportunity there to dig into what we'd like Visit Farragut, and then they have the stuff they're putting together for Visit Farragut anyway. So it's a win-win for all of us, I think, if we go that direction.
One of the things I've heard, excuse me.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things I've heard from people about the reopening is that they have real concerns about, yes, the businesses are going to reopen, but are people going to feel comfortable going out to eat? And my guess is there's going to be, like everything else in this country, there's going to be half the people that are chomping at the bit to go, and they snuggle up next to everybody at the bar and be right there. Then the other half, they don't want to get within 10 feet of anybody. So maybe sort of once the opening has taken hold and we know what people are, what some of these restaurants are planning to do, there could be some sort of marketing campaign or social networking that educates the public about the limitations that are applicable to the restaurants. I think if I'm not mistaken, the governor's requirements, you can only, the ones that open can only open to the extent of 50% of their capacity. Well, I know that because I read this material that comes out every day, but the average person probably isn't keeping up with those kinds of details. So maybe identifying some of these restaurants by name and what they're planning to do, when they're planning to open, and what they're going to do to keep everybody as safe as possible if they come in there would be a little bit of a helpful boost for people, and people would feel more comfortable going there. My concern about a big marketing campaign is only this. I'm not so sure that it feels to me like this whole thing is going to be a little bit gradual. It's going to be step by step by step. And if we oversell it and everybody starts showing up for all these places, but they're not open yet because of, I think we'd have to sort of be real comfortable that we knew what the plans of the businesses were. But those are all very good ideas, and they would fit within our structure. We've got entities that do this kind of thing, and it makes, all we're doing is talking about some additional funding for those entities if possibly they may need it. But that we don't get into the problem of do we have the authority or the power to do this, which is you know me, I'm scared about that kind of thing.
I will add to what you're saying, Tom, is especially with Visit Farragut with Karen, she's already got that relationship with the restaurateurs to call them up and say, okay, what are you doing? Because you're right, it's probably going to be reservations only for a while because they're going to limit access to the bars. They're limiting the number of people that can be in the building at the same time. And of course, many of us, if I'm going to go out to eat, I think I'd rather sit as close to the curb as possible. So I want to be outside. So, but with someone already in-house who has that relationship and understands what we're going through, is on the ground already, there's no learning curve there. There's just an opportunity to work with the businesses to figure out how they best want to be marketed. So I agree with you. That's helpful stuff to understand.
Okay, Louise, you've got your gym to where you space your machines. And I think that most everybody I've talked to, particularly the restaurants, I've talked to quite a few of them, they plan to do that. The real concern big concern that I could not answer was with the hotels as far as what they were going to do with their breakfasts, because a lot of them serve a hot breakfast and they're not sure what they'll do there. And so that was one of the items that I'll be asking Governor Lee about tomorrow, but as part of this opening program. But anyway, I do feel that we're on the right track with going about it this way. As far as anything else, I don't think either the FBA or the chamber, they're not staffed for this. We're not staffed for anything like this as far as trying to pick out what business we should try to help. As far as, I mean, with 650 businesses, to sit down and try to say, okay, which one? I mean, a lot of them you can't even contact right now because they're closed. But I think we're on the right track with what we've just discussed as far as the particularly social media and other marketing things that we can come up with that we know work.
Well, my question to you would be, is there a dollar amount that you're comfortable with spending on something like that to move forward on?
For buying ads, David, or for what?
For a marketing effort, for social media, for some print ads, for that's the $50,000 question. What amount of money is effective for a marketing campaign, depending upon how you decide to divide it up. I think the hard part is it's the entire, even if we try to spread it out by districts, the sales districts, how they broke it up. The beginning of this marketing effort is going to be dialed back. By the end of the marketing effort, it will be a totally different experience, because hopefully we build up and then we can open up. And so to me, it's hard to even, it's like the goalposts are going to continue to move through the entire, this marketing effort, because we'd like to start as soon as, I mean, I know we're talking about budget in July 1st, but obviously by that time, trying to fund a marketing effort at that time is probably too late. We need to be kind of on top of it now. So we're talking about, I don't know if we're talking about a budget amendment for this budget or what, but I mean, I just thought $50,000 because that's a lot of money to put to marketing. If you can't do it with $50,000, you got problems.
This is Alderman Pinchuk. Is Sue still on the call? Sue Stoll?
I don't see Sue on here. Not that she may not be on the phone, but Alderman, I can get with Sue and Karen and talk through just a marketing strategy internally what we think may be a good opportunity for us and get back with you as soon as we can.
That's what I was thinking. I think they would be the two good people to talk to and get some kind of reference, some kind of guidelines from them.
I agree.
Yeah, and David, if that timing works out, we've got hotel motel tax kicking in 90 days later that would then fund the tourism. So I don't necessarily think we have to fund it for 6 or 9 months, but if we fund it until the hotel motel tax is there, and then we have that money to also use, that could do the same thing.
Yeah, I was thinking it was going to be like a 8 or 10 week kind of campaign. I'm not sure what that looks like, but hoping that by 10 weeks, this initial shock is worn off and we've kind of found our new normal, whatever that looks like. But wishful thinking, maybe.
Well, let us come back and come up with, I guess, an outline of a plan, what that would look like, and get it to you, and then we can have more discussions about it and try to get something started soon. Obviously, is what it sounds like.
Sounds good.
Great.
That's great.
Okay, I think that's all that I had for budget issues tonight. Unless the board has any other questions or comments, we can take a little break before the actual meeting starts here in about 10 minutes.
Okay, the time is approximately 7 p.m. April 23rd, 2020. Farragut Board and Mayor and Alderman meeting will now come to order. Now we're operating by Governor Lee's Executive Order number 16, along with Knox County Health Department's orders of COVID-19 pandemic. Executive Order 16 is effective until 12:01 Central Daylight Time on May the 18th, 2020. In accordance with Executive Order, live access to the virtual meeting is made available through Charter 193 or TDS 3. During this period of time, all citizens' agenda or forum comments and questions along with a name and address should be emailed to comment@townoffarragut.org and should have been received by 12 p.m. today in order to be included in the record of tonight's meeting. All four Farragut Board of Mayor and Alderman meetings that are electronic meetings will be public notice. Tennessee state law. They will also be recorded and can be viewed later on the Town of Farragut YouTube channel. Pursuant to Governor's executive order, all votes taken will be by roll call vote. When a motion is made, an alderman will announce their name and read the motion for a second. After the motion is received, a business item, the applicant will be asked to state their name and address. They will then have the opportunity to give their presentations and then stand by for possible questions during our discussion. Okay, at this time, I'd like to go ahead and ask the county recorder to take a roll call vote for the forum.
Alderman Burnett.
Yes.
Alderman Meyer.
Alderman Meyer here.
Alderman Pinchuk. Uh-oh. Did we lose him?
His video's on.
Alderman Pinchuk.
Alderman Pinchuk is here.
Alderman Pavlin.
Alderman Pavlin is here.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams here. Okay, for the record, we'd ask that any media representatives please respond as well.
From what I can tell on our screen, we have Margie Hagan and Michelle Hollenhead.
Okay, any other media representatives? Okay, none. In that case, I'll now ask for a motion to approve the April 23rd, 2020 agenda as stated.
Alderman Pavlin, move to approve.
Alderman Pinchuk, second.
Okay, I'll now ask the town recorder, take a roll call vote, please.
Alderman Meyer.
Alderman Meyer, yes.
Alderman Pinchuk,
Yes.
Alderman Povlin,
Alderman Povlin, yes.
Alderman Burnett,
Alderman Burnett, yes.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams, yes. Let the record show that the April 23rd, 2020 agenda has been approved. And next, the approval minute. Ask for a motion to approve the April 9th, 2020 meeting minutes.
Alderman Povlin, move to approve.
Alderman Pinchuk, seconds.
Okay, now ask the town recorder to take a roll call vote.
Alderman Pinchuk,
Yes.
Alderman Povlin,
Alderman Povlin, yes.
Alderman Burnett,
Alderman Burnett, yes.
Alderman Meyer,
Alderman Meyer, yes.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams. Okay, let the record show that the April 9th, 2020 minutes have been approved and will be recorded as official minutes of the meeting. Okay, next, the mayor's report. And I want to thank each of the Farragut residents for pulling together as a community during these uncertain times. And most everyone has been up to the task of taking every precaution to keep each other safe. It looks like the safe at home order will be lifted soon, but I'd like to ask everyone to join the board members and our staff in continuing with physical distancing, face masks, and gloves. This seems to be the best defense we have at this moment. As a tight-knit community, we're all committed to helping our fellow citizens and businesses in whatever way we can, and we all look forward to a bright future. At this point, I'll now yield the floor to Vice Mayor Povlin for her report.
I don't have much to report. I appreciate Mayor Williams, exactly what you say, and I echo it. And I just wanted to, I know that Martha Buchanan's on the line to help us, to give us an update. And I just wanted to, before I introduce her, let her know we really appreciate her tireless dedication to her work, to keeping us safe, to keeping us updated. I know that this is unprecedented times and exhausting, and she's charting the course, and we really appreciate her leadership. And with that, I'll introduce you to Martha Buchanan. Thank you, Martha, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
I can see you.
Okay.
And I can hear you. Yes.
Hear you just fine, Martha.
Okay. Okay. Great.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Virtual meetings. So thanks so much for the opportunity to come and update you and answer. Really, this is about answering your questions best I can. And just kind of a situational update. We have 206 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Knox County now. 173 of those have recovered. 31 of those have been hospitalized at some point in their hospitalized. They're somewhere, they live in Knox County, they have COVID, and they're hospitalized somewhere, not necessarily in Knox County. And fortunately, we haven't had any more deaths since our last report. So that's kind of the situational awareness. Just a little update of what we're doing. The health department, we are actively getting reports of new cases and doing our contact tracing, asking people to stay in isolation, asking their contacts to also stay in isolation, and educating them on what to watch for. If you've heard, we're also doing a drive-through testing event on Saturday at the Civic Coliseum in partnership with the city. We're hoping to be able to reach out to a portion of the community that hasn't had a lot of testing yet. That kind of East Knoxville area, we haven't seen a lot of testing in that area. So we want to offer those folks an opportunity. We continue to test daily. We're partnering with Engineering and Public Works and using their shed to do a drive-through testing opportunity for folks by appointment every day. We tested probably somewhere between 80 and 100 people there today. Hopefully we'll test the same number tomorrow. It's nice because we don't have to put up tents and we don't have to worry so much about the weather since we are in spring in East Tennessee and it's kind of unpredictable. And in addition to that, we have staff working to educate businesses as the guidelines change, to educate the businesses on what the new guidelines are. answering those questions and complaints from the public when they have concerns about a business not being compliant. We're really, right now, if we look at our data in Knox County, what we see is that our case numbers are just slowly increasing. They're not jumping way up. They're just slowly increasing. And that's really what we're talking about with flattening the curve. Instead of a steep climb, it's a more shallow grade to the curve. And that's encouraging. We expect some little pop-ups when we reopen, but hopefully that won't be a big spike. It'll just be a little increase. Doing lots of things to keep the community safe as we do approach reopening. My staff is working hard on guidelines for the business and for the community. And that's what I have to talk. I mean, we're doing tons of things, but I'm really here to answer your questions about what we're doing or concerns that you might have or things you've heard, whatever. So I'll open it for questions.
This is Vice Mayor Hovland. I apologize. You said you're working on guidelines. When will they be available? Because sooner is better than later, so that these, we own a small business. We just need to know what we need to have on hand. We're a gym. What is going to be acceptable as far as meeting those guidelines? The sooner we have that information, the sooner we can prepare for opening.
Totally understand that. And it's been kind of an interesting waiting for be contradictory to the guidelines, because two sets of guidelines is just confusing, and we don't want to do that. So waiting on those guidelines, which we anticipate some of those being out tomorrow. We're already preemptively working on local guidelines so that we can just fold those in or make the small changes that we need to get those ready. We hope those will be out by early next week. And so we'll vet them over the weekend, incorporate any changes we need to, and have those ready to go out hopefully early next week is our plan. And excuse me, and through next week, we'll be standing up kind of a team of experts or, trained people that can answer questions. We anticipate a lot of questions. Our phone bank is taking plenty of questions about COVID-19 disease. We'd like to park that somewhere else. So we're looking at how do we facilitate that so they're not going to that general phone bank about getting appointments and questions about disease and stuff like that. So we'll have to work with IT and the county or the city to set that up a different way. So that's kind of our vision for how that'll work.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Buchanan, my name is Alderman Scott Meyer, and it is a privilege to speak to you. I am on the leadership team at Summit Medical Group here in Knoxville and the surrounding counties, and so I believe your wise decisions has definitely led to save lives and has allowed our hospitals and healthcare system to prepare for whatever happens after May 1st. And I wish we all had a crystal ball, and I know none of us do, including you. But here's a couple questions. Trying to understand how contagious COVID is, and as I kind of think through it, I kind of look at like measles at one end, measles being obviously very, very contagious, and I have the flu at the other end. So in that range, where do you see, in the sense of contagiousness, the COVID virus landing?
So I guess I'll answer it two ways, because part of COVID-19 is about immunity. We don't have any immunity to COVID-19 as humans, because we've not seen the virus before. So it's a lot easier for you to get sick because you have no immunity to it. It's passed as easily from person to person like the flu, but it's going to make more people sick because we don't have immunity. So for instance, when one person has the flu, they can make anywhere from 1 to 3 people sick, or 1 to 2 people sick themselves. But if somebody has COVID-19, they're going to be more likely to make 5 to 7 other people sick. So it's easier for us to catch it and get sick from it because we have no immunity. As far as the mode of transmission, it's transmitted mostly very similar to the flu. Unlike measles, it doesn't hang out in the air for several hours or any of those things. So it's really about our immunity and the fact that we have no herd immunity. So nobody's seen this, and so we're all susceptible to it. There's no vaccine. So again, we all are at risk for getting the disease.
I think that
answer your question.
It does, and it kind of validates my concern, just as a spouse of a physician and an executive in healthcare leadership, where I'm trying to reconcile in my own mind, when we open up the state, which we need to economically, but what are we really going to expect? And I think that's the $1 million question. I think what I've heard you say is perhaps that from what we do know, just of the virus, that it's probably more likely, it's more contagious than flu, probably less contagious than measles. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but and obviously things change. Do you have any idea about the death rate? And these are, I promise these aren't loaded questions. I deal with COVID-19 24 hours a day, not to the extent that you do, but I'm definitely running call centers, and we have thousands of patients calling the call center I run, and lots of questions and not a lot of answers. And you have the statistics out there, and who knows? But do you feel as a public health official that we have any really halfway decent statistics to where we could guesstimate what a good death rate is at this point? Or are we still trying to gather data because it's early on and we did a great job, staying at home, and so we didn't get impacted, obviously, here in East Tennessee as in other parts of the country?
So, we have 206 cases. We've had 206 cases in Knox County and only 4 deaths. So I can't do that math in my head, but that's a really good ratio of 200 cases. That may change as we open back up. We may see more people die. And deaths from a disease kind of have are more of an indicator of severity of illness than contagiousness. So, if a disease is very virulent or severe, we see more death with that. And we've also had, our hospitalization rate has not been terribly high. So that's been also kind of interesting to us as we watch this evolve. As our case rates go up, I'm sure that our hospitalization numbers and the number of people who pass away will also go up. But right now, our death rate is really positive. It's not, nothing's ever positive about death, but it's a good rate right now because of the ratio that we have. And so we'll continue to watch that. Some of the things that I was working on with my staff before I hopped on here, where part of our guidelines incorporate some of those data points you're talking about, so that those are the markers for us to be able to say, okay, we're still doing okay. We're still trending. We're trending up, but we're not trending up quickly. And so, we can continue to open up. Opening up doesn't mean we're going to go back to pre-pandemic ways of life. We're still going to need to social distance and wear masks and stay home when you're sick. And we're going to encourage employers to let people continue to work from home as long as that's feasible for them. We're going to be encouraging older adults and people with chronic illness to stay home as much as they can. So, and still limit size of people gathering, and have limitations on who opens when and those kind of things. So it's going to be very phased and hopefully slow enough that we'll start to build some immunity within our community, because people will recover and come back into the community, and hopefully we'll be able to break, and we'll also really increase our contact tracing. It's a really key piece. If you look at what's happened in other places, like in South Africa with HIV, contact tracing is vital to get, so you don't just get the case out of the population in isolation. You also get those folks who are at risk for having disease out of the population. And so you're breaking that transmission. You're taking those people out of the community so they can't make other people sick. And that's how you stop transmission. And so we're considering some other things to be a little more proactive in our case not in our case finding, but in our contact tracing, so that we can start faster. One of our challenges, as you know, is testing and testing delays, and not delays in performing the test, but delays in getting the test results back. So we're talking about how can we do a better job and not wait for the test results to come back, and maybe be a little more proactive on the front end inconvenient for people when the test comes back negative and we put people in isolation for no reason, but that'll protect our community. And I think people will understand that.
Well, thank you again. It is an honor to meet you over video. You have been a very wise leader, and I cannot thank you enough for the decisions you've made and the number of hours that you've spent and the sacrifice you've made for our community. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you.
This is Alderman Pinchot. I've got a question concerning self-testing. Are those kits available in Knox County?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Will they be sometime
I'm
soon?
not sure they're available anywhere. That's a great question for the company who's distributed. Say, okay. Or any foreknowledge of that. It usually is driven by the market, like our capitalist.
How about the antibody test?
There are antibody tests available. Those tests are not very reliable at this point. They still need some validation. So we have concerns about their utility. Once we get a laboratory that has validated those tests and says that they're useful outside of experiments, then we'll be happy to use those. At this time, we don't have antibody tests that are reliable enough to be used for clinical decision making.
And I have two family members, one in Chicago area and another in Florida, that were very sick late January, early February, and they're pretty much convinced they had it that early on and are anxious to get tested.
Sure. There continue to be multiple problems with the antibody test, cross-reactivity with other coronaviruses that actually cause the common cold and other things. So they're not that reliable yet. Hopefully they'll get better.
Thank you.
Dr. McCann, this is David Smoke, the town administrator here. And I know as we're opening up the economy and getting people back to work, is there a time frame as you open up certain parts of the economy that you have, either a lag time to see the cases come back and see how that opening up of the economy works, so that way we can open up other sectors soon thereafter that you have kind of in your mind right now?
Well, so we would base some of that on COVID-19 is around the longest time is 14 days. It's usually a little shorter than that. So we'll be watching those numbers really closely. About 7 days in, if we're going to start to see increase in cases, we'll start seeing that then. We do expect to see an increase in cases. And like I said, what we don't want to see is a spike, which is why it's going to be really important for everybody to continue to follow some strict social distancing guidelines. And that's going to help reduce that risk. And people continuing to work from home as they can and things like that. So again, a lot of how we do and how we tolerate opening depends on how well our community follows the guidance, because we can't control that. People have to make the choice to follow the guidance, and businesses have to make the choice to follow the guidance in order for us not to go backwards. That's going to be really important to get the community to buy into that they play a really important role. They've played a really important role in keeping our numbers low. So I'm hoping they'll continue to play an important role. Continue to understand that and continue to keep our numbers low.
Dr. Buchanan,
it's about a 2-week time frame.
Thank you, Dr. Buchanan. Scott Meyer here. So what is a realistic expectation of when a vaccine you think is going to be available?
The earliest we'll have a vaccine is next year.
This year?
The earliest it'll be available for public use is probably next year.
Next year, okay.
Thank you. Dr. Buchanan, Alderman Drew Burnett here. See if you could comment a little bit on elective procedures coming back, and maybe if there's been discussions on phased approaches of elective surgical procedures, or if they'll come back live all at once. Sorry, did you get that?
Yeah, I did. So the hospitals have a really well-written plan for that, and it's kind of will be stepped out. Like, so it's written, and I'm not sure when it's going to be released for the public, but I do know they have a staged plan, and everybody's kind of doing that in concert. We're really fortunate in Knox County that our hospitals work really well together. That doesn't happen everywhere. So we're fortunate for that to take place. So within that plan are other benchmarks to make sure that they're not going too fast. So I'm sure that'll be shared soon. It's not my plan, so I'm not going to share all the details, but I do know it's there. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Buchanan.
Could I
Thank
ask
you so
one?
much.
Could I ask one question?
Sure.
This is Tom Hale. This is Tom Hale, town attorney. I have been confused, I think, from the beginning about the testing issue. And I think my question will show my ignorance, but it's a fairly simple question. I mean, I understand that people that don't feel well should be tested, and people that have been in contact with someone who has it should probably be tested. I get the impression from listening to all of the discussion that there's a whole bunch of people that also need to be tested that aren't being tested. And I've not been able to grasp or understand why that is. Why do they need to be, for instance, me? I don't feel bad, and I hadn't been around people that are sick that I know of. But I get the impression that there's a lot of folks out there that think that everybody ought to get tested, and I'm not sure that that's the least bit possible.
Well, you're right. It's not possible and not necessary. I think part of what's happened is that this has become a very politicized outbreak, and politicians are making decisions about public health issues. And so, you hear the president say, everybody's going to get tested for free, and you hear the governor say everybody's going to get tested for free. And, we kind of end up having to do some of that. We are still targeting folks who are higher risk, folks who are sick, or folks who have been in contact with somebody who has COVID-19. Some of the people who don't get tested would be people who have really mild disease, so they're just not that sick. 80% of the people that get COVID-19 will not seek medical care because they don't need to. So a lot of those folks who aren't going to seek medical care, we want to know about them so that we can isolate them and protect other people. So those are the people that I think are important to test, who just are kind of mildly ill, not too sick, not going to go see their doctor. Maybe they don't have a doctor. And we want to test those folks so that we can educate them and educate their family and protect those around them. And so those are the folks we really want to outreach to.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Buchanan. We appreciate your time so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you again.
I'll sign off. Thanks.
Okay, next will be, and we do want to thank the doctor for taking her time. It looked like she was still at work. So tonight we have 3 items on tonight's agenda as far as business items, and we'll start off with approval of certificate of compliance for Concord Liquor and Wine, 135 Brooklawn Street.
Yes, sir. So the purpose of this agenda item is to approve the certificate of compliance for an off-premise liquor store. And they're looking to go at 135 Brooklawn Street, Suite 153. And so before they can get that license from the state, they do have to come to the town of Farragut to have their certificate of compliance. Currently, we have 2 liquor stores in the town of Farragut, and we have an ordinance that limits us to 5. So we do have licenses available. The applicant and his attorney both are on the line with us tonight, and so the motion is to approve a certificate of compliance for an off-premise liquor store permit for Concord Liquor and Wine at 135 Brooklawn Street, Suite 135.
Okay, I Ask for a motion with a second. Please
Vice
give your
Mayor-
name and your motion, please.
Vice Mayor Pavlin, move to approve.
Alderman Meyer, second.
Pinchuk, second.
Okay, that was Alderman Meyer.
I think I beat Alderman Pinchuk, but
Okay.
if he wants to second, I'll yield the floor.
Okay.
Either way.
Now, Corey, you can take your pick there. Okay, looks like at this point, we'll first ask the town recorder to read any of the citizens' comments or questions concerning this business item.
We have no citizen comments for this item.
Okay, thank you. Since we don't, then we'll start with Alderman Meyer. Do you have any questions or for the applicant or his lawyer?
Alderman Meyer, no, sir.
Burnett?
Alderman Burnett, pass.
Pinchuk?
Pass.
Vice Mayor Pavlin?
I just have, I guess, questions of assurances. Obviously, you're going to handle it. There's training that goes along with that, making sure that you're IDing your customers and you don't need underage drinking. Enough of that happens. So I just wanted to understand that they were aware that they've done the training that they're supposed to do and that whoever they employ will have the training as well.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Andrew Bateman. I'm the attorney for the applicant, Dignesh Patel. Mr. Patel owns a number of gas stations and convenience stores in and around East Tennessee, and has had extensive understanding and dealing with issues related to proper identification and making sure his staff follow all the applicable laws.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, Mayor Williams also passed, and if we have no more discussion, it's completed. Then we have a motion with a second on the floor, and I'll ask town recorder to take a roll call vote, please.
Alderman Pavlin.
Alderman Pavlin, yes.
Alderman Burnett.
Didn't hear you.
Oh gosh, I'm the tech savvy guy. Come on. Alderman Burnett, yes.
Alderman Meyer.
Alderman Meyer, yes.
Alderman Pinchuk.
Alderman Pinchuk, yes.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams.
Mr. Bateman, I'll have the mayor sign that certificate and I'll email it to you as soon as I get his signature.
All right. Thank you. And I appreciate your all's time and attention tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, let the record show that the certificate of compliance for Concord Liquor has been approved. Okay, next will be approval of bids for contract 2020-05 street resurfacing.
Thank you, Mayor. Every year we look at bids for resurfacing our streets throughout the town. This year we have several streets that we're looking at doing. Smith Road from Kings to Pike to Grigsby Chapel, and then from Grigsby Chapel on to Andover Boulevard. We also have Grigsby Chapel Road from Smith to East Foxton Drive. We have Sonia Drive from Dundee Road to Orrin Road. We have Lookout Point, which is in the Concord Hills subdivision. And we also have the NHC Greenway, which is from Sugarwood Drive to Virtue Road. On April 14th, we received 4 bids, and the low bid was from APAC Atlantic for $481,596.50. We have used APAC in the past, and they've done a good job for the town. And so staff would recommend approval of an award of bid to APAC Atlantic for $481,596.50.
Alderman Pavlin, so moved.
Alderman Pinchuk, seconds.
Okay, we'll first have town recorder read any citizens' comments or questions concerning this business item if available.
We have no comments.
Okay, if none, we will open the floor to each alderman for discussion. We'll start with Alderman Meyer.
Alderman Meyer, pass.
Alderman Burnett.
Alderman Burnett, pass.
Alderman Pinchuk,
Alderman Pinchuk passes.
Vice Mayor Pavlin.
I have one quick question. David, the NHC Greenway, isn't that fairly new?
Answer that. That's going to be paved is not new. That's the original one that was put in years ago. The section that is new actually goes from, I guess that's NHC Drive, over, it goes west up to Kingston Pike. One section of it does, which we really consider a sidewalk. That's brand new, but the one that's from Sugarwood to NHC Drive, I guess, is the one is on the list there, and that is the oldest portion of it.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. That's all I had.
Okay, Mayor Williams passes as well. And with our discussion completed and the motion with a second on the floor, I'm town recorder to please take a roll call vote.
Alderman Burnett.
Alderman Burnett, yes.
Alderman Meyer.
Alderman Meyer, yes.
Alderman Pinchuk.
Alderman Pinchuk, yes.
Alderman Pavlin.
Alderman Pavlin, yes.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams, yes. Let the record show that contract 2020-05 for street resurfacing has been approved. Okay, next will be the approval of change order for Town Hall ADA restroom renovation.
Yes, sir, Mayor. We had on February 13th approval of bids for the ADA restroom facilities here to be renovated at Town Hall. Recently, we've had 4 change orders, all relatively small amounts, but we need to bring those to the board for consideration. First is change order number 1, which we were trying to use an existing door. Unfortunately, it would not work in the location that we were attempting to put it in. And so the amount of that door or change order is $938.43. We had change order number 2, which was for touchless fixtures in the restroom facility for all 3 bathrooms at $4,257. We have change order number 3, which is actually a credit of $57.14 for soap dispensers that will be later installed by Public Works. And then change order number 4, and again, we were going to try to use a metal frame to go around that initial door, and it does not work as well. So we had to purchase another frame for $304.36. So overall, the amount of the change order we're requesting at this time is $5,443.04, and we would recommend approval.
Alderman Pavlin, move to approve.
Alderman Pinchuk, second.
Okay, again, we will first ask the town recorder to read any citizen comments or questions.
There are no comments on this item.
If none, we'll now open the floor to each alderman for discussion, and we'll start with Alderman Meyer.
Alderman Meyer, pass.
Pass. Alderman Burnett.
Alderman Burnett, pass.
Hey, Alderman Pinchuk.
Alderman Pinchuk, pass.
Vice Mayor Pavlin.
I'm just going to be the pain in the butt and ask all the questions. David,
Okay.
is this getting to the end of the project then? It sounds like we're getting into nitty gritty. Does that mean it's coming to an end?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, the project is scheduled to be done before the next election cycle. So right around, I guess, the end of May, 1st of June, in that time frame.
Okay.
So that they're on schedule. They're doing their job in there. They can get in every day to work. So we don't see there being any delays in the project.
All right. Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor Pavlin. Mayor Williams will also pass. Okay, with our discussion completed and a motion with a second on the floor, I'll now ask the town recorder for a roll call vote, please.
Alderman Meyer.
Alderman Meyer, yes.
Alderman Pinchuk.
Alderman Pinchuk, yes.
Alderman Pavlin.
Alderman Pavlin, yes.
Alderman Burnett.
Alderman Burnett, yes.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams, yes. Let the record show the change order for the town hall ADA restroom renovation has been approved. Okay, next will be the town administrator's report. I'll yield the floor to the town administrator for his report.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we have been working diligently and obviously paying attention to the governor's orders on when we can come back and open up town hall, open up our community center, open our parks, our fields, different things like that. We're going to be very cautious in all those areas, but a couple of things that we're working on behind the scenes for when we are able to work open again. One is the public spaces that people come into and visit with either our codes officials or our staff up front in administration or our community center. We're putting up some plexiglass or Lexan type barriers there. So that way, when the public comes in, we'll at least have that initial barrier between us and them, because obviously we don't know where they've been. They don't know where we've been either. Another thing that we're doing is making sure we have face masks for employees, especially those that are either higher risk or need those to interact with the public on a regular basis, as well as gloves. So we've been able to get some supplies in that regard. We're having to make sure we be cautious in how we dole those out and how often they use them, things like that. But right now with town hall closed, it's been a lot easier to do that. But we definitely want to have all those precautions in place before we do open up to the public. And we're obviously waiting on the governor's orders and obviously the health department here locally to see when those things can start happening again. So with that, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions, but that's all I have to report.
Okay, does any alderman have any questions for town administrator on his report?
Hey, Mayor, I don't have a question, but I had an idea I'd like to bring up if now would be an okay time.
Sure.
Okay, so as we all know, we've got the unique benefit of having a world-class healthcare institution located within our town limits, being Turkey Creek Medical Center, where hundreds of men and women, moms, dads, sons, and daughters are working there, putting their lives on the line on a daily basis. And I just thought, man, it would be great if there was something we could do as a town to show the town of Farragut's appreciation for their hard work and dedication day in and day out facing patients that may have COVID-19. Just a small gesture to say we appreciate you, we love you, we support you. And the idea I had was maybe grabbing a food truck or two in the form of like a dessert, like a shaved ice, an ice cream truck, just kind of a small dessert to park out front and to say, hey, anybody with a Tenova badge, come out at any point during the day. We'd like to cover a treat from the town of Farragut to you all to say thank you for all your hard work and dedication. Just think it would go a long way in showing our support for them. I mean, we are blessed to have them within our town limits, and what they do for us on a daily basis, I think in this time is pretty amazing. And just an idea thrown out there of a way that we could say thank you to them.
I like that idea, except I would propose that we maybe use a business in the town. VG's Bakery comes to mind, or the cupcake, the cupcake lady, I can't remember what.
GG's, oh my gosh, come on.
Those things
All
are
right.
amazing.
I tried to think today of ice cream trucks or what food trucks were located in Farragut, and I couldn't come up with any. Ask David. We were trying to brainstorm, but yeah, I'm all about if we could do a Farragut business there, that would be even better.
This is Alderman Pinchuk. Zaxby's, I can't remember who's the lady that does that marketing for Zaxby's.
Milligan.
Yeah, she contacted us about wanting to supply some food to the hospital. Zaxby's was willing to do that, and we might want to reach out to them first and see if they're still interested in doing that.
I think they are. That'd be a great move.
We could co-op something with maybe a dessert and some chicken. Yeah.
I like that idea.
I nominate David to make that happen.
I second.
Drew has the big idea. Somebody else has to put.
We'll get right on that. But we'll contact them. We'll figure out what we can do and how quickly we can get that done.
Okay,
so
I am
great.
happy to help out any way I can.
Okay, next will be Citizens Forum, and I think we've still have the town attorney standing by.
You do.
Okay. Pursuant to the governor's executive order, we ask that all citizen comments or questions be emailed to comments@farragut.org, which must, along with their name and address, be received by 12 o'clock or 12 p.m. the day of the meeting to be included in the record of the night's meeting. I'll now ask the town recorder to please state the citizen's name and address and read their comments or questions.
Yes, sir. We have two speakers or two emails tonight. The first one is from Laura Squires. Her her question is, have the first 11 5D tower applications been given final approval by Farragut? Have any additional site applications been received by the town of Farragut? If so, when did the shot clock begin? Our second one is per minute 1.02 of the board meeting, March 12, 2020. Is the town of Farragut creating a single aesthetics plan ordinance to cope with the future location/antenna requests as indicated in the comments made March 12th is required such be in a single ordinance instead of pieces of multiple ordinances? It appears from the comments in that meeting that unless the aesthetics requirements are assembled into one ordinance, that we as a town will have more difficulty in the future when other carriers want to deploy, and we need to maximize all possible boundaries. If not being put into one ordinance, why? The third one is during Representative Zachary and David Smoke's conversation on March 4th in Nashville with Verizon and AT&T representatives, it appears that some sort of understanding was reached about the design or look of the 5G support poles. It will accept in the existing PSS cannot be used. Will this style of pole be uniform throughout Farragut, or will the fancy neighborhoods get fancy poles and less fancy neighborhoods get less attractive versions? Presented in the January 16th meeting. If there is a standard fancy pole that Farragut has agreed to accept, would you please publish a picture on the town's website and in the Farragut Press?
Okay, I'll let the town administrator and the town attorney both comment if they have a comment.
Well, Mayor, this is David Smoke. I would just comment that we have not gotten all the subject twos addressed by Verizon at this time. We have not received any further site plan applications at this time. We obviously feel like we have an aesthetic plan in our current ordinances. As I stated at our last meeting, we do need to come up with an easier way for the carriers to understand what those aesthetics are, and so we will be working towards a ordinance that addresses aesthetics for poles throughout the town, but we have not been able to get to that yet. Obviously, we've had a lot of other things on our plates, and we will get to that as soon as we can.
Okay.
And I'll add, let me add it. This is Tom Hale, town attorney. There's been some suggestion by a number of people, including some of the carriers, that suggests that there has to be an ordinance entitled Aesthetic Guidelines for poles. That's simply not correct. The statute defines what an aesthetic plan is, and it's very general and speaks in terms of any regulation that you have that has to do with those issues. 2 years ago, before the state statute was ever adopted that allowed for these poles to be put in the town's right of way, the town staff put together a very extensive ordinance that regulated the small cell towers. And that ordinance has lots of provisions in it that one would call the provisions of our aesthetic plan. There are some provisions in that ordinance that are probably beyond and would not be permitted by the state statute. The way we've handled it up to now is we have insisted on the application of the provisions that would be part of our aesthetic plan that do not violate state law. And we have not attempted to apply the ones that clearly are opposed to what the state law is. So we have actually, believe it or not, put together a draft of an ordinance that has accumulated some additional possible regulations that have to do with things that were not addressed in the original ordinance, but they're absolute. There's not very many subject matters that you could deal with that wasn't dealt with in that original ordinance. And about the time we got that prepared and distributed internally is when we encountered our current situation, which has taken everybody's attention away, including the carriers, frankly. They're probably, my guess is that, this would be my opinion. The Supreme Court issued an order back a month ago, probably, that extended all legal deadlines under rules, regulations, statutes of limitations that were to do during the period from the beginning of March through the end of April. Those were all extended until May the 6th. So to the extent that we had any shot clock issue that, and I don't know that we did, but assuming we did, everything was sort of put on hold during this period by the Tennessee Supreme Court. So I think we're in reasonably good shape on this particular subject. And we do have some things in mind, and I think Mark is studying some of the potential additional things we might want to include. One of the things that makes our situation so much better than everybody else's or all the other municipalities or most of them is that we've been applying a lot of the provisions of our aesthetic plan for 30 years now. And so it's a lot easier for us to take the high ground that this is something we've been doing for a long time. We didn't just pop up last week and decide that we're going to adopt all these aesthetic provisions. So I think that's going to stand us in pretty good stead, I think.
Okay.
Mayor Williams, may I comment as well, please?
Yes, you got the floor.
Okay. First, anything that I know, I spoke to Mark Shipley today, and he has been he's working on this. Actually, was working on this today. Anything that he compiles is going to come to the Planning Commission so that we can review and understand, and the public can come and understand what we're trying to do. One of the things that I have been pushing for is that we choose a light fixture for poles that are going to go into our neighborhoods that don't have existing poles, because I would like to require them to co-locate if at all possible, so that these neighborhoods that have existing poles aren't stuck with more poles than the poles they already have. But if they have no poles, I would like us to make sure that we pick a light pole that looks like a light pole and doesn't look like a antenna with a light pole stuck to it. So we have that choice, we have that ability, and that infrastructure is out there. There are businesses that build these poles that look like light poles, and the antennas are contained within the body, and it's very stealth, and you wouldn't know that there's an antenna in there. And that's what I think we should have for our community. Now, all of that, of course, like I said, is going to come to the MPC. That will be publicly noticed. People can come and comment, and we can have discussions about that. But a point I want to make clear is just something I take personally, was the comment of, will the fancy neighborhoods get fancy poles and the less fancy neighborhoods get less attractive versions? I am a representative of the entirety of the North Ward and have spent some time in some neighborhoods in the South Ward where people needed help. I have spent time in Ridgeland, Ramsgate, Chapel Point, on Sonia Drive, Farragut View. I don't pick and choose. Where the people need help and I have solutions or I can help them, I help them. No neighborhood is fancy or not fancy. As far as I'm concerned, they're all fancy. They're in the North Ward, and I have a particular affection for that community because that's the community I represent. So I just want to make that clear that my time isn't limited for one person, one group or another group based on the price of their house. Everyone in the North Ward matters to me. I've spent so much time in Ridgeland, which is the only neighborhood across the highway. I go there every year and I answer all their questions and I've helped them with their stop signs, and that's what I do. So just to make that clear, I appreciate it. Now I'm getting off my soapbox.
Hey, Louise, this is Alderman Burnett. I would 1000% echo your comments. And when I heard those comments read, I thought, are we planning to do that? Not in a million years would I ever support any type of separating out the quality of anything based on the neighborhood. So I don't know where that came from, but I would never, ever, ever support that. So I appreciate those comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Burnett. I appreciate that, Alderman.
Okay, and Pinchot?
I have no comments. Pass.
Okay, Alderman Meyer?
My only comment is that I was confused when she talked about a not fancy sub or a neighborhood because I'm not aware of one in Farragut.
Okay, I think that's everybody's opinion. So, okay, let's see. I think the town recorder said we had one more.
Yes, sir. I have one more, and it's from Mike Mitchell. It states the U.S. Congress passed the Telecommunications Act in 1996. Part of that law stated that no cellular tower or antenna could be prohibited due to health risk. This is a bad federal law that is unconstitutional and is also a violation of the Nuremberg Code, which was passed in 1947, which states that no citizen will have medical experiments performed on them without their permission and consent. I do not consent to having a medically untested, unproven 5G technology put in my front yard 25 feet from where I sleep. I have provided to the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission medical proof that 5G towers and antennas can cause cancer. There are thousands of medical studies that prove this. I ask that this be placed in the minutes this evening and discussed in Citizens Forum. There have been bad federal laws in America before, such as the law which prohibited women from voting and the law that segregated schools and businesses. Those laws were repealed, as the Telecommunications Act in 1996 will be too. The town of Farragut has repeatedly claimed it must follow the bad law in the Telecommunications Act in 1996. I feel that this is a violation of the town charter and your oath of office. Other towns in America have done the opposite and defended the health and public safety of their residents. I asked the mayor and aldermen to protect the residents in Farragut. In the Key, New Hampshire, the city council voted to block until next January applications from service providers hoping to launch 5G until cellular providers can prove the technology is safe. I've included a resolution for the Farragut Board of Mayor and Aldermen to consider that protects my rights and my health. I ask that this resolution be put on the next Board of Mayor and Aldermen agenda for discussion and vote. Sincerely, Mike Mitchell.
Okay, at this point, I'll again ask if there's anything that town administrator can answer there. Our lawyer, Tom Hale.
Yeah, let me, I've reviewed this resolution in some detail. And I think my main comment about this has to do with the credibility of any resolution that you as a group would want to adopt. If the way this resolution is written, it implies that you as a body know the answer to scientific questions about potential harm from RF radiation that is clearly in disagreement or in dispute among the experts that work in this area. So I guess my sense of it would be, I think there is some merit to taking a position that is based upon undisputed facts. One of the undisputed facts is that there is a conflict among the experts. There are experts that are on both sides of this issue. There is no dispute that local governments don't have the authority under the law to regulate on the basis of the health effects of RF. We don't have legal authority to do it. It's undisputed that the FCC is delegated the responsibility to adopt regulations to ensure that when these towers are put up, that they will be safe for the public. So, if your will is to put out a resolution, then I think there can be a resolution that is based upon those undisputed facts that calls upon the federal government to require the FCC to do what the law delegates to them to do, which we can't do. But to come out and say, like this resolution does, and imply that there's only one side to this discussion and that there is not two sides that have opinions about it, is just not appropriate. We don't know which side of this thing is right. Mr. Mitchell may know, but I can assure you I don't know. I don't have the ability, and I don't think any of you all do either, the talents to understand what the right answer is. But there is some merit to the whole idea that if a federal agency has been given the responsibility to make the determination, they should make the determination if nobody else is allowed to do it. And you can make a pretty powerful resolution just with those undisputed facts and be well within your rights and make a clear statement like rational people to try to get something done at the level where they have the authority to do it. All of this thrashing around at the local level as if somehow or another we're going to change this thing by ourselves without going to Washington or Nashville, it's just a lot of hyperbole. What we need is reasonable, rational resolutions and action by people that are concerned, talking to the people who have the authority and the ability to make the changes. And that, if we do it any other way, I'm afraid we lose our credibility. And I'll be happy to take this resolution and rework it and try to put it in terms that I'm talking about, which is, hey, there's a lot of undisputed things here. We think it calls for action. And as you know, we got this lawsuit out in California that is fighting for this very thing we're talking about. And if we ought to be able to wait until that case gets to some point where some resolution occurs. But that's what the purpose of the lawsuit is to force the FCC to do the evaluation that they have not done since 1996. So I'm not opposed to it. I'm just saying I'm opposed to the tone and the content. And I think we could do something that had some meaning if we took this and did a little work on it.
I'd love to comment. Is that okay if I have the floor, Mayor Williams?
Go right ahead.
I appreciate what you're saying, Tom, and I'm in agreement with you. I'm not a scientist and I am not a medical professional, so I can't say with any definitiveness what is true and what is not true, and that's what I struggle with. But I do know that I'm terribly frustrated that at the local government level, we have been stripped of most of our ability to have any control over what happens in, at the very least, our residential areas. I don't have a problem with a resolution stating as such, and that to require that the FCC should do their job. They started a research project, and I don't know why it was halted, but it was halted. I will say that they, with regard to, is it Keene, New Hampshire? State of New Hampshire Health Department has taken on to do some kind of study. So Keene, New Hampshire, whatever state it was, they had something to rely on to say, hey, our state of New Hampshire is doing this study. If the state of Tennessee were doing a health study, then we would have a leg to stand on and say, hey, state of Tennessee is doing something, so we're going to halt until we get their findings. But I can't, as a local government official in Farragut, rely on the state of New Hampshire's health study it wouldn't carry any weight here. I don't think we could win on that argument. So if we could convince the state of Tennessee Department of Health to start a study, that would be helpful. But I agree with you. I don't have a problem with the resolution, but it has to kind of state the facts as they are. So I appreciate that.
Alderman Meyer.
I agree wholeheartedly with some kind of resolution as Tom described. My concern is, and I think I've said it before, I lean more that I think there's something to the health concerns. I don't know what they are. And my bigger issue is that there are experts on both sides. And it would just be really nice if somebody stepped up and made the final decision on whether there's health issues or not. So I like the idea of the resolution as Tom outlined it.
Okay, Alderman Pinchot.
Yeah, I'd like to see what Tom comes up with. I think that's a good idea to have him work on that. So I appreciate his efforts.
Okay, Alderman Burnett.
Yep, I agree. I'm in favor of a resolution along the lines of what Tom outlined.
Okay, sir. I'll follow along with all of you there. I would like to see I would like to see that one reworked with Tom. Something that is usable. This particular resolution here, as it stands, is not. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a medical specialist. Far from either one. But I do disagree with one part of that particular gentleman's, and that's that. And I want him to understand that we're not in violation of our charter. Nor am I violating my oath of office. He has repeatedly put that out there, and every time he comes to our meetings and says that, and that's not the case. And I hope he will understand that that is not the case. I'm not in violation, and I do not consider any of the rest of you in violation. And that's all I have to know.
And as your lawyer, I don't consider you in violation of anything. In fact, what you're doing is attempting to follow the state and the federal law and as best you can in the way it's given to you. Part of the problem with this is if it were only the FCC regulations and we didn't have this state statute, it would be a lot easier to kind of ignore that FCC regulation in the sense that you don't have jurisdiction over us. We don't have to follow what your FCC rules are. That's not part of what we bought into when we formed as a town. But you lay on top of what the FCC has said, what the state of Tennessee has said in the statute that they've adopted. That is the creator of the town of Farragut, the state of Tennessee. I've made this point before. We exist solely because we're empowered by and created by and have the authority given by the state of Tennessee. Well, if we don't follow state law, there can be some consequences by the carriers, arguably by the state of Tennessee potentially. And so I wouldn't be advising you to do something that was a violation of your obligations And I don't think you are. I think that there are some, as we've seen in today's world, there's intimidation factors that I think some people think is effective, and they get emotional themselves, and so they say things because they're emotional. And I appreciate people that are emotional and have passion about what they believe in. But I think this particular situation, there's a way to accomplish the end result in a much more effective manner. And I appreciate you all letting me take a shot at this.
Okay, well, it sounds like we got a consensus on that item. So if there's nothing else, without objection, I think the time is approximately 8:08. And the April 23rd Farragut Alderman meeting will now be adjourned.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, David.
Welcome. Thank you all.
Thank you, Allison. Have a good night.
Everybody have a good rest of the week.
Yep.
Thank you.